Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Dr. Nadia Brown. She has a company called Doyenne Agency. She is very, very interesting because she works with women, I think, in one of the areas in which many of us suffer. It's probably our Achilles heel in many ways. And that is women empowering them to really make the most of who they are, becoming strong at sales, but also acknowledging their own wealth, their own worth, I should say, as well as wealth. So, Dr. Nadia, how did you get started and what's your journey to this point?
Oh my goodness. I often say I was the least likely person to lead a sales agency. So prior to leaving corporate, I had quite the varied background. I've been in engineering and IT, financial services. So I bounced around a lot. My doctorate is in leadership. And so when I left, I really had a passion around helping women who were working in predominantly male fields, and really trying to find their voice and their leadership style in an environment that was, mostly men, because that had been my experience. But during that journey, I realized that being a business owner isn't just about doing your craft, right? It's also the sales, the marketing, all the other things that come with having your own business. And so those early years are really hard because I was not good at sales. I didn't like it. And I had eventually to make a decision whether I was going to allow that to continue to, derail me, or would I face this challenge head on. So I'm happy to report I faced it head on. I figured out, how to sell in a way that aligned with me, my values, my personality, but it was also effective for my audience and the women that I get to work with. And in that, I also found that a lot of women were also challenged with sales and having sales conversations. Like I wasn't alone and feeling like sales was icky and I didn't want to do it. So now I get to serve and work with those women to help them develop that confidence, that courage. And so they can create that consistent revenue that we all need in our businesses.
One of the things that you said that just intrigues me, and I'd like to explore it a little bit with you, is you learned how to do sales aligned with you. Mm-hmm. Your values and who you were. Talk a little bit about that and what created that aha in you, because I think it's that component that creates that disconnect for many of us when we talk about sales. So tell me about that.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And so part of that journey, I ended up being a part of a team. I always tell people this was quite by accident. When they invited me to be part of the team, I thought I was going on the team to do one thing, which I did. But as part of that, I ended up doing some sales stuff and having sales conversations. And during that experience, one of the owners approached me one day and he was just like, Nadia, I don't know if you realize, but you sell very differently than my partner and I, who is also a male, but you're just as effective. And being a researcher, right, it was like that light bulb, like, wait a second, let me pay attention to what he's saying. And so I started to pay attention to how I engaged versus how they engaged. And he was right. People still, they're still able to enroll people and have these conversations. But I found that it had to be Nadia's way. So I didn't try to show up like a guy, like one of them. I would show up, I would listen, we would laugh, we may cry, it was just, it's Nadia. And so I was like, oh, and then I stopped making it wrong, because I think sometimes, especially being a student, right, we learn how to do things in a certain way. And if it's not done that way, then it's wrong. And I was like, wait a second, I learned the elements of sales, but then I was able to make it my own. And that's one of the things that I teach, is that take the things that I teach you, take it to your lab, mush it all around, add some glitter, and then come out and make it your own, because we're not the same people. Our clients aren't the same. And until you own it and really make it your own recipe, if you will, it's not going to work as effectively.
So tell me, what was different about you from the two people you worked for or worked with?
One of the biggest differences, I feel that I had a lot more patience. So,
Oh,
and I don't know if it was my newness or what, but it was just like I had a lot more patience. I allowed people the space to talk. And a lot of time, sometimes you just need to talk it out when you're making a big investment or doing something you've never done before. And I just gave people that space without being rushed. I was genuinely curious about them and, invested in really encouraging them in their dreams. Like it wasn't forced, it was genuine. And so I think that those were some of the pieces that really just helped people to open up. And so people would just talk to me about all kinds of stuff. And then, once they shared, I would be like, well, we have a solution, that can help with that if you're open to learning more. And most of the times they're like, absolutely. And so that was how we started.
interesting. So was your close rate also different, or did that not change? Your process was different. Was your length of sales longer?
Not always.
Okay.
And I think that was also the fascinating part, like being a part of that process. And I look back and I'm still amazed because I went from someone who completely did not like sales at all to really just growing into developing a level of comfort and developing a level of proficiency. So now on this team, I'm like number one salesperson. I'm like, how did this happen? And so there were all these different things. And I think part of it was I was just so determined. You're just like, I am going to master this. So part of it, I just went in like, I'm going to make mistakes. So I didn't allow myself to get so bummed out when I didn't get it right or I didn't close. Like I just had to kind of create my own process for how I dealt with that. And then over time, I developed a thicker skin, if you will, where it didn't bother me as much. But also my proficiency got a lot better. My close rate increased. And so it was fascinating.
Wow, good for you. And now you work with women, especially women, primarily women. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We do work with some men, but I find that I can definitely relate to the challenges that women have when it comes to sales.
Okay. And so, what is it that when women come to you, they come to you why? And what is it that they want you to help them with?
Yeah, there are a couple different things that they want. One is a woman may come and she's just like, I just need to be more comfortable or includes in having sales conversations, which usually also includes I need to improve my close ratio. So we talk about how that works and how to have those conversations. Sometimes it's I need to improve my sales systems. Like I'm making sales, there is revenue, but I know that there are gaps. And so a woman will hire me to support her and possibly her team at that stage to just kind of look at where are the gaps and how do we systematize it. So that's where my IT and engineering brain comes in, very useful in those situations. And then there are times when she's just at a point in her business where she's like, I've been doing this. I figured it out by hook or crook, but I am at a point where I just don't have the bandwidth to personally be the salesperson anymore. And she's like holding on tight to that role, but she knows that she needs to now release it. And so I support her, even help her build her sales team, or in some instances that our team will do the sales for her, especially if like she's like having an event or something like that. So now she has support in generating that revenue for her business.
Okay, so wonderful. Talk a little bit about your business, if you would, and how you support people with sales, the full gamut, because you do more than just training, and I find that also very interesting.
Yeah, the training actually, although I love it, was the latter part. It's part of one of our newer offerings. So when I first shifted the business and we started to launch the agency, we only did done for you. So it was all just coming in, supporting women so that they could do more of what they were really skilled at. And the revenue piece was taken care of.
Right.
But obviously, there's only so many people we can support doing that because your business had to be at a certain level and all that kind of good stuff. And so we started doing trainings like our Convert Labs, our 3-day intensives to really help you look at your systems, how you're having your conversations, close any of those gaps, and really get that in place. Because my vision, Lois, is that women get the support that they need to generate that in revenue because I know that most of us didn't start our businesses just to make like $1 million, right? Like it was a bigger thing. There was a bigger vision. And so when you have those resources, now you have the ability to hire support, to donate more, to do your philanthropic work, right? And then when you have support, it gives you more of your time freedom. And ultimately, it really helps you impact your legacy in terms of how you want to run your business, or if you want to sell your business, or you just want to spend more time with your family. Like it gives you a lot more options. And that's one of the things I'm really passionate about in the work that I do.
Having more options. So you also manage people's sales teams if they need help managing their sales teams. Talk a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Yeah. So there comes a time as your business grows where you're like, I need support. And then you're trying to determine where that support comes in. And I've, haven't been a person that people have hired, whether it's me as an individual or my team, is they don't always know what they don't know in terms of hiring support. And I think I know it can be very unnerving when you're bringing someone in to support you, particularly when it comes to making sure you don't experience a dip in your revenue when your business is growing. Like that's the last thing you want, is to have that transition and now you don't have the resources. And so with that, we're able to support people in just how do you hire that person? How do you make sure you onboard them? How do you make sure that you set them up for success so that you don't experience those lows and you can confidently pass that off and grow a team if that's what you want. Some people don't want big teams, but there are those that are like, oh, I need a big team because I have a really big vision. And so we help with that and making sure they have all of those, because that's also a system and a process, and we help with that too.
Got it. So what are some of the unique challenges that women have as they're growing their business that you see women struggle with? That is, maybe it's unique to women, maybe it's not unique to women, but what are those struggles?
One of them is just this fear around the money, right? Like I feel like there are times when we don't dream as big. We don't, we're a little more reluctant to kind of go for some of our bigger dreams. And I would also say a part of that too is feeling like everything has to be perfect before we put our ideas out in the world. And having worked with both men and women, I don't see that as often with men. I remember the guys I mentioned earlier and supporting them. There was one day, and I don't know if it was literally out of the shower, but it just felt like it was one of those, I had this great idea in the shower moments, right? For this offer they wanted to offer. And it wasn't perfect. There was no landing page. There were so many of the elements that I know we as women tend to be like, oh, no. We have to have these things in place before we start having these conversations. And we didn't. They just kind of threw it out there. And I started having these conversations with people. And I was like, okay, I'm selling this. Like people are saying yes to this. There are certain things that we need to get in place. And it was fascinating to watch that process and be a part of it, because when I left and now I'm doing things in my own business, I found myself kind of defaulting to, wait a second, no, I need the landing page to be right. And I need this in place. And it was like, no, you don't, Nadia. Like you've already done this. And so I see that a lot, where I feel like our desire to have it all dialed in before we put it out can sometimes hinder us. And I'm not saying put stuff out there that's not somewhat together, but I do see the value in testing some things with the market, because then we don't waste the time in our offices building things that aren't in alignment with our audience. And now we're frustrated when it doesn't sell. And so, how do we, balance that part, that need and desire for it to be just right, but also the benefit and the value of just kind of putting it out there to see how the market responds. So then we can hone it before we, etch it in stone, if you will.
before you etch it in stone. Nadia, I really appreciate that perspective, because I'm with you on that one. I want it perfect. And it's so interesting because some of the research that Sally Helgeson has done on women in the corporate world and how they rise or don't rise, as the case may be, is women often look to getting it all perfect. Mm-hmm. And only men, if they have 3 out of 10 of the necessary components, they're quite happy and they're quite ready to move ahead.
Yep. They're like, let's go for it.
Isn't that interesting?
Yep.
So, a lot of times we talk about that glass ceiling as if somebody created it, mm-hmm. but a lot of times it's of our own creation, mm-hmm. because of what our mindset is, isn't it?
Absolutely. That was the topic of my first book, How to Shatter Your Inner Glass Ceiling. It was all about the number of times that women told themselves no before anyone else gave them the opportunity, right? Like, you didn't even give someone the opportunity to say no. You thought about applying for this job or going after this big client, and then you talked yourself out of it because you're like, well, they're going to say no anyway, so why bother? And you just never know until you try. And so I think that that's definitely one of the lessons that I try to glean from the men is, you know what, Nadia, you don't know till you try. It's always a no unless you ask. So ask, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that happened, they say no, but at least you know that it was a no versus always wondering, like, maybe it wouldn't have been no.
I think that is that fear of the no, fear of failure, fear of rejection, mm-hmm. which I think is something that women grow up with, even as part of our psyche. Mm-hmm. And so we do a lot to avoid it, don't we?
We do a lot, yes. Which, as you know, being a business owner and doing sales, rejection is all part of it, which I think always, and I talk a lot about that too, is we have to find a way to not allow our emotions or any of those experiences that may come up for us to take us out of that, because we have to do the sales. Sales needs to happen in our business. No sales, no business. And so if it's not you, then you need to hire support, because it's just a part of the process. Like, if you're going to have a business, you have to do sales. Okay,
so let's talk about that, because I think there are people listening who know that they need help. They haven't had quite the courage yet to take that step and say, you know what, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it right. Mm-hmm. And here's somebody who's got a process and a system. So that when somebody calls you and needs help, walk us through. What does that look like? What do you do? How do you help people?
Yeah. So one of the things is, I think, is really helping people get the confidence, right? So, in the trainings, and part of the feedback I've received is there's no judgment. So I feel like, there are people come and there's just a lot of angst around, what if my business isn't at this level? Or what if I haven't sold as much as that is because I have yet to forget what it was like to struggle with that. And to then be able to help them to see and own the value and the difference and the impact that we make in our work, right? Like, it's like, we all, especially service-based, it's harder to put that because it's not tangible. So it's like, well, how do I price this? And how dare I, who am I to say that I would charge like $15,000 or $30,000 to work with me? Like, people get really antsy. God help you if I say like a 6-figure number, and really people, but it's just like, why not? And so then, helping them to see the opposite side of it, like take you out of it. And then you look at the impact that your work has on your clients, on your clients' clients, or on your clients' family. Like, a lot of the work that we do, and we really look at our impact in that way, is priceless because of the impact that we have and the things that we do and the things and the way we change people's lives. And so part of that process is really helping you to own the value, but then also find the words to talk about it in a way that will impact and influence your marketing. But then also, when you do have conversations, to help your prospects understand how you can solve their problem.
So for you, Nadia, people have already a business in place. Mm-hmm. Somebody listening to this to sort, am I the right person to come to Nadia? Who is it that you work best with?
So yeah, a lot of our businesses that we work best with tend to fall into two camps. One, they're already at six figures and they're like, I'm really trying to scale. And I know that I have some systems and some things that really just need to be tightened up. And so we support them in that way. The others are like, I want to get to this level. I want to see this consistency, but I just haven't quite figured out, especially this sales piece. And so I work with them to help them really own the conversation, the process to get those pieces in place so that they can have that confidence to create that in their businesses. And one thing I share, and probably why I work really hard to keep the judgment out, is it took me years to figure this out once, I started my business. So with all the education I have, right, it was that sales and all, like you said, the fear of rejection and wanting to get it right the first time and all of those things really influenced and made it really challenging for me. And so I have a lot of compassion for people that are in that space. And so if you're like, I'm just trying to figure this out, then reach out. One of the things that we now offer is a diagnostic just to help people figure it out. Like, I take the time to, work with people to say, okay, let's just look at this, take a moment to just kind of diagnose what's going on. And then we can decide, am I the next best step? Like, working with our agency in some way, or is someone in my network actually a better next step for where you are right now in your business, and to be able to, support people in that way. Because a lot of times, to your point and your question, they don't know. They're like,
Right.
All I know is my business isn't making enough money, right? That's all I know. But I don't know how to figure out what next step makes the most sense for this stage. And I remember being there and investing and like, just, being so frustrated with those investments. And so this year, that's one of the reasons why we created that offer. So I could, you could have a trusted person to be able to come alongside you and say, hey, let's just sit down, let's look at this, and then let's make a decision. And I work with I know a lot of great people that I've built relationships with over the years. And I am not at all offended if I'm like, you know what, Lois, I'm sorry. While I would love to work with you, I think that this, would be the next best step for you. And I would love to make that connection so you can get the support you need.
So, Nadia, sales begins with lead gen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think so, at least for me, when I started in this world and I was learning all the different pieces, I found myself going around and saying, you mean I have to learn content? You mean I have to learn how to do a funnel? You mean I have to? And the list kept going on. And it was like almost every month was a new discovery, right?
Yes.
And so I think a lot of people, they get leads, but they get stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
But even creating the right leads, so you have the sales that you want. So talk a little bit about that, because I think so few people really get the right help to put that together.
And yeah, so I love that, because a lot of people feel like, or they treat it like the sales starts when you have the conversation. And I'm like, no. Sales starts long before you actually have a sales conversation with someone. And you want it because you want to start qualifying people before they get on a conversation with you. You want to attract the people that are like, yeah, they're leaning in, and the people that don't resonate, you want them to go away. Like, you don't want them to continue to be part of your world, or, get on your calendar and have those conversations. And so I think, part of that work is definitely being clear on who that person is. And that's one of the reasons why the work that we do, when we start talking about like the benefits and how people are different as a result of working with you, then we take that as part of your sales conversation and we start having that conversation and applying it to your marketing and your messaging, because you want people to understand, and not everyone realizes they have the problem that you can solve. So that's one part of your market. And then not everyone realizes that you can help them solve it. And so part of our job is to help them connect the dots and put those pieces together. Like, oh, you can help me with this. And that is part of the sales process in your marketing. You want to have that conversation in your content when you're putting things out, when you're speaking or, podcast or whatever, right? You really want to start letting people know, this is who I work with. This is how I help them. This is how they're different, and then it's like, oh, because then people start to feel like, how did you know I was thinking that, right? Like you're having sales conversations and like, I feel like you know me. I feel like you've been inside my brain. And that's when you know that you have it dialed in, because now you're like, yes. And then when people come to you and you're having sales conversations, majority of the time they're ready. They're just like, tell me my next steps. How do I get started? Because you've been having that conversation throughout their entire client journey.
What I love about what you're talking about, Nadia, is you take a person into a conversation and you get to know them. Mm-hmm. You're not selling them something. You're creating a relationship. We talk about that lightly, I think, yes. But you really get to know them. Mm-hmm. And that's when the sale becomes easy, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And I teach people to treat it like a conversation, like a relationship. And you hear it, but to your point, you don't always see it happen. You're like, oh, is that how your relationships go? But it's really getting to know people, understanding the challenges or the fears. Like one of the challenges I feel like a lot of people that might want to work with me are, one, they've worked with people in the past that have said one thing and done another. So now they're a little jaded. And the second thing is like, there's still this big fear around sales and being able to trust that sales process and their confidence in it. And so I can speak to that in my marketing and really helping to nurture that. And then I think the other piece is you have a sales conversation with someone, they don't say yes yet. And then what do you do, right? And for me, it's like, you continue the conversation, you continue to build a relationship. Because not everyone says yes at first. Yeah. Some people kind of need to vet you a little more. And so that's a big part of honoring their buying process and their, and their timeline, which I think is often overlooked in sales as well.
I think, so many of us, what we've done is we've gone through programs that say, here's the 12-step process. Here's the 5-step process here. And you go, okay, did that, but why didn't it work? Mm-hmm. And so we've got a checklist, but the checklist doesn't have in big letters, relationship.
Right. Yeah.
And we also assume it should be instant. We should be able to make a sale on the first call.
Yes. And that has been, oh my gosh, touted for a long time. If you're not closing sales in 15 or 18 minutes, you're like the worst person on earth. And I'm like, no, not everyone makes buying decisions in 15 minutes. It doesn't matter how good you are, right? And so, take the checklist. There may be some gold in it, but like you said, add relationship, add your personality, but then also give yourself a lot more time. And I think in this day and age, people are, well, some people, there's a lot more comfort with technology. There are still people that, again, we've all had experiences that weren't that great. And so there is that lack of trust that that's a part of what we have to overcome in building that trust. And you only do that through relationship. And a lot of times that just takes time.
It does take time. And so I think part of the problem is sometimes people don't think about sales and getting help with sales until they hit desperation. Mm-hmm. And so then it's like, but I don't have the time. It's just, I got to turn it. Right.
Yep. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because not only do they do that when they need help themselves with learning, improving their sales skills, it happens when they need support with hiring a sales team. Right. So you make the same mistakes and like, I just need help right now. And you're looking for that solution that promises to fix this instantaneous. And it's not always an instantaneous fix. It's, even hiring a salesperson, you still have to give them time to learn, to grow, to understand your business, your offer, to start to give them some runway to be successful. The same as when you are learning sales skills, right? You still have to have time to create or generate enough leads to create that consistency so you can have those conversations, give yourself the opportunity to mess it up, get it all wrong, right? And so I think that you're right, and just not waiting until you're drowning to now, because that's when we make a lot of our we make a lot of misjudgments when we're making decisions from a place of desperation.
Boy, that's so true. Nadia, what have we left out? This has been a wonderful conversation, and I think one so important for everybody, and particularly for women, because I think women actually should soar at sales because we tend to have an innate ability to build rapport.
Mm-hmm.
Not always, but I think more so often than men, because we tend to be the keeper of family spaces. So there's something about that intuitively, but I think there's so much fear associated with it. So I'm really appreciating your perspective. What have we left out that people need to know about?
I think the biggest thing is, just like you said, I love how you just said we have that innate ability. And I think the fear starts to crush that and choke it out. And so allow yourself to create your own process. If it takes you 45 minutes to have a sales call, give it, or if you just need to give yourself that amount of time so you don't feel rushed, do it. I think that we've made ourselves so wrong in that how we naturally flow that it hinders our progress. But I think that as more women start to honor that, we then give other women permission to be like, you know what? I'm not going to have 20-minute calls. I need 35 minutes, right? And so to really honor your process and how much time you need to listen, like you said, to build that rapport, because it's really hard to build rapport and close a sale in 18 minutes when like the clock is ticking, right? And so having that clock in the back of your mind may be challenging. And so, just encouraging women to do it your way. It's okay. And when you mess up, no worries. Just keep going. It's going to be fine.
So, Nadia, we will have information in the show notes about you and how people can reach you. So for those of you who are listening and you're going, wow, I could use help with sales. Sales have been my Achilles heel. Here's a resource for you that could be really wonderful for you. It can open a door, a future that you won't have if you don't have a good sales perspective. And then, Nadia, you have also written Leading Like a Lady. I love that title, Shattering Your Inner Glass Ceiling. And so those of you who are interested, then get that on Amazon.
Absolutely. If you want to learn more about your possible sales blind spots and just, okay, where might I not be looking at things or my persona in sales, you can grab that, take our quiz. We have a quiz at discoveryoursalesblindspot.com.
Wonderful. And if any of you are having difficulty getting a hold of Nadia, please let us know. We'll be glad to connect you. I just think this is such an important thing that so many women, especially, put off until the very end, and then they regret it because sales drags them behind where they could really get to.
Absolutely.
So, Nadia, thank you so much for your time and for being with us today on Building My Legacy podcast. Please remember to visit our website at buildtomorrow.com with the number 2, and also our other website, new, just starting, called startwithcollaboration.com. So, Nadia, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.